Over the last 6 decades, Transcendental Meditation, or TM, pioneered by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, has transcended geographical, religious, and cultural borders to emerge as a defining technique to calm mind and body. TM has as its adherents some of the world's most famous and influential names who themselves have practiced it for decades and who are now advocating it with great zeal. Carrying on Mahesh Yogi's tradition is his successor and a passionate champion of TM, Dr. Tony Nader, a highly qualified Lebanese neuroscientist. A medical doctor trained at Harvard University and Massachusetts Institute of Technology with a Ph.D. in neuroscience, Dr. Nader is also a much respected Vedic scholar. Along with the filmmaker David Lynch, himself a seasoned TM practitioner, Dr. Nader is now focused on a $500 million TM World Peace Initiative that they think will help a world in ferment and bring about a much needed sense of individual peace. Dr. Nader spoke to Mayank Chhaya Reports. First of all, thank you so much for your time. I know you travel all the time and it's been difficult for you to slot this in. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It's my great joy. You've done great work around the world, and it's a joy to be with you.
Thank you. I would like to start with something specific. What is the Global Union of Scientists for Peace? And within that, what is the $500 million peace initiative that has been launched with Mr. Lynch?
The Global Scientists for Peace, the Union of Scientists for Peace, is based on studies and research that have shown that there is a technology to create world peace, which is very different from the used and never successful ways of doing exchanges, wars, trying to subdue the other, or even just coming together with good intentions and good ideas, but working only on an intellectual level.
Right.
So it is based on developing consciousness, individual consciousness, and through individuals, the collective consciousness of the nation, and leading to more coherence and activity within the nation and in relation with other nations. And so this is what David Lynch wanted to emphasize and strengthen. We have more than 40 scientific studies on this field that are very, very well documented. So it is not a philosophy, it is not a wishful thinking. It is a very real evidence-based technology of awareness, of consciousness, that can change the thinking and the behavior towards more harmonious relations and bigger vision of long-term perspective rather than short-term wins and gains,
Right.
but establishing society on a very solid level. And therefore, it has its own, of course, understanding of how this happens and why it happens. Ultimately, basically, what we want is the results.
Right.
And that's why scientific research has been used to show that in a repeated way, in a proactive way, and a prospective way, which means you announce what you're going to do, you get the scientists to sit and look at it, you have controls, and you examine the results, and you see that it actually works.
Right.
And so that is really the basis of this organization and the launch and the idea that David Lynch has come up with to actually advertise that.
Right. Transcendental Meditation has the world's who's who as its adherents. How do you propose to roll them into a project like this?
They have come to Transcendental Meditation for their personal benefits, and they have found that it really works. It's not just an idea or a gimmick or something that allows you to have a little bit of rest or a little bit of better sleep, reduced anxiety, depression, which is something it does. But it has much more than that. It has the ability to allow the individual to find themselves, to know themselves more than they have ever known what the self is before, because they discover their true self, which in the ancient Vedic tradition is Atma, is the self of everyone, the self of the universe. And that is who we truly are. And we can discover that. That's why it's called transcendental, which means it goes beyond the surface definitions, the surface understanding of what reality is, the surface understanding of who we are and what we are, and goes through that by direct experience. Again, this is very important. We can intellectually analyze and conjecture and have theories, but the main thing is, what do we experience? How do we feel about ourselves? How do we directly sense who we are? And so when you discover that inside you is an infinite reservoir of peace and harmony, an infinite field of creativity and intelligence, and that you find this is displayed in your activity, displayed in your creativity, then you find something very, very powerful. And that is why the who's and who's of the world are in it, because it's genuine and it's real. Now, they're in it for themselves. Now we want them to understand that there is a step more than that. Right. And that is, the society benefits from individuals transcending, practicing transcendental meditation. The whole society benefits. And that is ultimately the only solution that is secure, that is assured, that is truly evidence-based, that can make a difference for conflicts, for accidents of the roads, for crime in society, and for relationships between nations.
Right. It's interesting you should mention evidence-based, because having written the Dalai Lama's authorized biography, one of the subjects that we discussed was how he has frequently and routinely engaged with neuroscientists about how meditation essentially rewires your brain. Of course, your approach at TM is somewhat different compared to Buddhist meditation, because that's rather specific and it requires some measure of following, which is different from TM. I'm curious, why is it that, why do you think TM might work where other global efforts have not really produced the kind of solution that you're talking about?
First, let me congratulate you on your book with the Dalai Lama. It's wonderful. And the Dalai Lama is a saintly person who is really caring for the well-being of the world, and is wonderful how you present him and present the message. And there are different techniques and ways of thinking about it, of understanding the reality of life from intellectual perspective, and techniques that can help on so many different levels to rest well, to be deep, to go back to the self as much as one can, from emotions and feelings and compassion and understanding. The technique of transcendental meditation has the speciality of being natural, easy, and anyone can practice it, from children that are 4 or 5 years old with a special technique until they get 10 years old. And then ultimately, from there on, anybody of any age, any background, any level of understanding. So it doesn't require intellectual understanding. It doesn't require philosophy. It doesn't require belief. It is just a technique that follows the nature of the mind, which is the nature of life, the nature of living. And what is that nature? That nature is to grow in knowledge, to grow in understanding, to grow in experience. And how do we know this? If we want to ask ourselves a simple way, that is, we ask what anybody wants. Everybody wants more. You want more love, you want more happiness, you want more enjoying life, you want more understanding life, you want more knowledge. So we want more of the good things that makes us feel that we are growing, we are expanding. And that more is based on the nature of the self, which is pure consciousness, that is being seen in individual life from a limited perspective, and that wants to blossom, wants the lotus of life to open and blossom fully. And that blossoming is the nature of life. However, we always look for more towards the outside. Through our senses, we are projected towards objects that we think have what we are looking for. So we want more money, it's on the outside. We want more love, it's from the outside. We want more knowledge, we try to understand the world from the outside, projecting out through our senses. What transcendental meditation does is turn the awareness inside, and since inside of us is more than the most, because we have that unified field of all the laws of nature, we have that Atma, that pure being, that wholeness, which is our true self, and we have the machinery, which is our body and our nervous system, which is structured in such a way that it can experience that, it can live that, and therefore, guided by its own nature, the mind starts settling down towards its original reality, guided by its nature to want more and more. And if more than the most is within us, then this is where it wants to go. That's why we say it is natural, it is easy. You don't have to force anything. You don't have to concentrate. You don't have to contemplate. You don't have to use your intellect. Just use the technique, and then the mind dives deep within and experiences the true self. And then all the rest comes onto you in a very innocent, simple way. The body rests, the mind rests, the body heals itself because it gains deep rest. And there is that sense of deep peace and harmony within. And this has been studied scientifically, objectively.
Right.
So when we say evidence-based, it's not only evidence in terms of logic, but evidence in terms of trial and experiments. We have more than 600 scientific research studies published in the best journals, referee journals, and that have shown, compared to different controls, to different techniques, to different ways and habits and education, that have shown the effectiveness of this program.
Right. You mentioned the internal as opposed to the external. External being the manifestations that we see, objects of luxury and objects of pleasure, etc. I am struck by the dichotomy because the kind of followers that TM has attracted in terms of who's who that we mentioned, all of them have achieved a measure of external satisfaction, as it were. A lot of them have their own private jets. They have a lot of money. They have essentially experienced all the goodness of life that material world offers. And now they are getting back into their internal world. A vast majority of human race doesn't have that. How do you relate TM to, say, a completely ordinary person who has nothing going for him or her in terms of external luxuries?
You can come to this program from different doors. One of them is, having tried everything and you are not satisfied, you can say, I'll try one thing more, which is, I've tried everything in the outside, and I've tried wealth, and I tried celebrity, and I've tried this. And when I come back to myself, something is lacking. I just don't feel it's fulfilling. And why is that? Is because we want infinity. That is the nature of life. And the outside will never be infinite. There will always be something lacking. There will always something you want more. And this is not greed. It is the nature of life to want more.
Right.
Now, once you've had what people think is more than anybody, you want to try, well, there must be something else. And then this is one door. And you try transcendental meditation, and maybe those great individuals who have been successful and have shown success, they have found that there is something more, and they've taken it. But you might come to it simply because you don't sleep well, because you have hypertension, because you are stressed, because you want the creativity, you want something to do, you are poor and you feel stressed and overwhelmed. And one, can think, oh, I'm stressed, I better first work and achieve things. And then when I have done that, then I can have time to sit and relax and sit and find myself and all of this, because these things seem to be philosophical. In fact, it's not. What you want is to use the intelligence that is within you. It's like somebody who has wealth in the bank, and it's a big wealth, but they don't know about it. Suppose they've forgotten, or they have amnesia. Or they just don't know. The parents left something and it's there and they don't know. So they can live poor. What you want is to connect them back to the wealth they have. What is the wealth we have? It's ourself. So somebody who is weak or poor or diseased or like this should first do it, because then they go and access the inner stability, they access the inner wealth, they access the inner strength, the inner ability to know and to understand. And then from that platform, they can see more, understand more, achieve more, and be more. So it is not a technique like to say, okay, I have achieved everything in life, now I'm going to be a recluse and go back. It's the time for me, now that I have done everything, it's the time for me to revert back. This is also a tradition which we know in the ancient tradition. There is a time in life for everything. First you work and you do, and then there is a time for spiritual life, etc. But in this case, it's not a technique just for the recluse. I mean, those who want to be recluse, that's fine, it's great. But it's a technique for action. It's a technique for achievement. It's a technique for creativity. So the more we are, the more we can give. The more we are strong, the more we can give strength. The more we are knowing, the more we can give knowledge. The more we are happy, the more we can give happiness also. So by knowing oneself, by being established in that strength and inner reservoir of creativity and intelligence, then we can come out and be creative. And we have seen people who have done it, that have come from different situations, and they have seen it's more giving them more creativity, more intelligence, more success in life. So all of these are different doors. One might say, okay, I have high blood pressure, and it has been shown to reduce blood pressure as much as other medicines do. And so if you practice it, then you can do it just for that. And fine, this is your purpose, and the side benefit is enlightenment.
Sure. So, you began practicing TM in 1975 as a pre-medical student, I believe.
Yeah, you know about me then.
As a Lebanese, how did you hear of TM and what drew you to it?
Well, I was seeking, I knew life has more to offer. Like every adolescent, every young adult, we all search for understanding what's the meaning of life, why we are here, etc. And with time, we find there are no answers, and the answers are just mostly dogmatic. You have to believe, and then everything else is mysterious, and it's beyond our understanding. So you go on with your life. I just set myself to find that there is something more. It couldn't be that life is just like that, mechanical and all of this. And I grew up with great hopes and great expectations of life, with really an environment that shows, life can be grand. And then there was a civil war in the country, and people were fighting each other for beliefs. So fighting for something that's supposed to be spiritually unifying, spiritually uplifting, that is for the purpose of higher values. And you kill each other and you fight like that. So it was for me, there is something that doesn't work. So I wanted to understand what in the human mind and the human body make us do all these things as humans. And so I thought I study medicine. This is what will help me to understand the physiology and how the physiology works and why it leads to certain activities of the mind, because I thought everything is physical and physiological. And then some friend said, you can listen to this tape and see this knowledge. And I heard Maharishi speaking, and he just was proclaiming that life is bliss, and that, there is something bigger, that we are more than what we see, more than the eye shows. And he was so full and real of all that he was saying that I was really attracted to try this technique. And I tried it. It's funny because I said, where can I learn? I've asked different people who told me. And the address was very interesting. It was near the American University of Beirut.
Oh, I see.
There was a street. It was called Bliss Street. Bliss was one of the founders, or it's the person. It's a person, but it's interesting that the name was Bliss.
Bliss, yeah.
And they had found a center which was in a lighthouse. Actually, the very old lighthouse, hundreds of years old. And below the lighthouse, which wasn't operating anymore because it was kind of archaic and old, they had a center, a shop. Mm-hmm. So the address was on Bliss Street at the foot of the lighthouse, at the feet of the lighthouse. So I thought that sounded interesting.
Yeah, it is. It sounds quite picturesque to me.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. You have said that TM has over time led you to, and I quote you now, experience a reality which is inner, beyond sensory level, transcendental, but more full, more peaceful, more blissful. You did touch upon it a bit a while ago. Would you care to elaborate a bit on this for my viewers?
Yes, absolutely. Really, see, the thing is, usually we experience things through the senses. So what we call experience is taste, smell, sight, touch, etc. Or we think about things. So we think about the weather, we think about our people that we like, we think even our feelings and like that.
Right.
Or we analyze them. There is the thought that jumps from one idea to the other, and there is the analysis, which we call the intellect. So the intellect analyzes, I want this, I don't want this, this is a good investment, this is not a good investment, this is a good person to be friends with, this is a good decision to make, what should I do, etc. This is the intellect. So there is the reasoning, the rational part, and there is the experiential part, but usually the experiential part is on the level of the senses.
Right.
Now, all of this is happening in a field which is a field of consciousness, a field of awareness. And that field of awareness is on which the thoughts happen, on which the intellect analyzes, on which the senses project their experiences. Because without consciousness, it's like turning off the light. There is nothing. It becomes dark.
Right.
So that is our consciousness. Now, what you discover in transcending is that you can experience in a similar way as you would experience with the senses something very profound that is on the level of your awareness. You experience your consciousness itself, your awareness itself, experiencing itself in a sense by itself,
right,
without any object of experience. And that is what we can call the absolute, the self, the infinite true self. And it's therefore an experience similar to the sensory experience, because it's a direct experience. You see, when you see a flower, you see the flower. It's not a question of analyzing or thinking or intellect. It's just an indirect experience. Now you can directly experience yourself. When you close the eyes, you can hear a noise or a sound. You experience that sound on a mental level. It becomes like a thought. So the thought can be experienced on a high level of activity, many thoughts jumping around, or can be more subtle, more deep, more faint, and yet you're still aware. And now you imagine that the thought vanishes, disappears. There is no more thought, and yet you're still awake. So you're experiencing, the person who was experiencing the thought now doesn't experience anything other than the experiencer, because you're left on your own by yourself. You're not asleep. You're very wide awake, very alert, and the studies have shown that you're very highly alert and awake within, yet you have no specific experience of a noise or a thought or anything. And this happens in a natural way. It's not something you force or try to create void in your mind or like that. And so that experience for me was the experience of the absolute. I was always thinking, we're always experiencing relative things. Why relative? Because they change. Everything is changing. There is nothing the same. A thought jumps from one thought to the other. Even a stone, you take a stone and you say, well, this rock has been the same for thousands of years. It's not. It's changing every second because the molecules are changing. The atoms are moving. The electrons are moving. And it's, changing subtly. It looks on some level that it hasn't changed, but everything in the relative field of existence is a field of change. So I was looking for something which doesn't change. And that was ultimately the discovery that it's my true inner self, that absolute pure being. And that's a fantastic experience.
Right. Now, I was again looking at some of the videos by Mahesh Yogi. One of the things that stood out to me was I mean, there is a mantra, but that mantra is not the way other meditation offer. It could be just an absurd sound. It could be anything that may not have any meaning at all. And then you concentrate on that, lower your level to the kind of area that you're talking about. When you reach that absolute state of bliss, everything stops. It's just you and that bliss.
Exactly.
What kind of sound were you given when you began practicing? Do you remember it?
Yeah, it's a sound that has no meaning. Of course, I use it every day.
Would you care to share, or it's too personal for you?
It's personal. It's a sound for diving inside. And actually, the technique doesn't require concentration. So, people imagine you have to concentrate and repeat it in a very hard way and keep it there. It's not like that. There is a technique. So you learn two things. You learn the sound that is most appropriate for you. And then this sound has to allow you to dive in. So you don't actually speak it out, because it means it's then using it in the wrong direction to speak it out. So it's an inward, it's personal, and it's intimate, and it takes that habit of being like a vehicle, because it has no meaning. So it is not specific. It is not specific on the surface level, which means if the mind is sitting on something very specific, let's say apple or flower or something, then the mind is caught by the image, is caught by the structure, is caught by the association with that image on the surface. And therefore, you cannot let it go. You reach a certain depths of your mind, and then you're held back by those specifics. So that's why the sound has no meaning, and we look at it without meaning and just use it like that.
I see.
And it has at the same time to be able to dive with you. So it has to have certain qualities. Otherwise, there are sounds that can be, irritating or not right. And so that has to be correct. And that's from the tradition of Vedic masters that we have these sounds that Maharishi has taught us.
So the sound is, to understand the practicality of it, the sound is given by the teacher, or it's chosen by the practitioner?
It's selected by the teacher. There is a small interview, and there is a technique, and then based on Maharishi's instructions from the Vedic tradition, from Gurudev, Brahmananda Saraswati, who is given those techniques to Maharishi, who has shared them and taught us how to do it.
How do you balance that inner blissful reality that we are talking about with that confronts us on a daily basis in the external world and external life, where you have to do mundane things to survive? How do you achieve that balance?
Actually, the activity is very important. And we say this to our students who come to learn, that there are two steps of progress: rest and activity, rest and activity.
Right.
And we usually take an example, when you want to dye a cloth, usually in the past they would put the cloth in the paint and the color, and then remove it and let it be exposed to the sun or to the environment, and then the color will fade away. A little bit will remain. You dip it again and you let it fade. You dip it again and let it fade. And that's how the color gets stabilized for good, and it never goes away because it has been exposed to the outer value. So what we say is transcend and act. So these are the two steps of moving forward: rest and activity. Rest and activity. Rest, we rest during the night, but not enough. Now we transcend for a few minutes, morning and evening, and come out in activity. When you transcend, you come out, and some of this absolute value remains with you, but the activity is going to wash it away.
I see.
And then you transcend in the evening, you remove your stresses and strains, you clear up, you have a good night rest, and then in the morning again. And then the activity actually is more enjoyable because it's on the platform of inner well-being, of peace and harmony within. So you are clearer, you are better, and so you perform better. At the same time, you are stabilizing this color, if you like, of the transcendent. Because if you put the cloth in the color and don't do anything, the first time you remove it, it's going to have the color go away because it will be exposed to the thing. So it is a technique for action, ultimately, for achievement, for achievement in life. At the same time, action helps to stabilize this inner experience so that ultimately, even when you are acting, you are still in the transcendent. And that is the state of enlightenment, what we call, never losing the self. And in the ancient tradition of yoga and the teachings of Krishna, it says yoga sta kuru karmani, which means established in yoga, established in that evenness of the self, perform action. Then action is performed with greater intelligence and greater effectiveness.
That's fascinating. I'm glad you brought it down to that level so people can understand where you're coming from. You met Maharishi at a health conference for doctors and scientists in Switzerland. What was your first impression of the man? Because you had been practicing TM by that time, right?
Yes. I feel like I met Maharishi inside when I really transcended. But the first time physically, personally, it was in Switzerland, yes. I had done a medical exchange program. I had finished my medical training, and there was an offer to do in Switzerland or other countries what they call exchange program. So I selected Switzerland because I knew Maharishi was there. And I thought I'll spend time there. And so I went to that place, and then I came to where he was in Salisbury's beautiful place on Lake Lausanne, near Lausanne, on this beautiful lake. And there was a health conference there, so I was invited to meet him. And just when I came to him and met him, it was really a special experience because I felt the whole universe stopped. I felt that was a moment where I was the only person present for him.
I see.
This was how powerful was his attention and ability to kind of leave everything. And so you could see it's the transcendent almost, really, not almost, but really that's how I felt looking at you. And therefore, when the attention shifts, there was this powerful feeling of presence, of wholeness, of, you can demonstrate, describe it with many words, including, care, empathy, compassion, love, all the good feelings were just floating there. So for me, it was a radiant moment, as if the sunshine, was there. And I'm not an impressible or suggestible person. I'm very, very analytical, very careful about what to do or not to do, how things happen. I'm critical also, unfortunately, sometimes. But at that time, I just surrendered in a sense, and it was just absolutely a profound feeling.
I see. Which year was this?
This was 1980.
1980. So but you had already been practicing TM for 5 years by
Right,
that time. By that time,
right.
it's interesting how the convergence worked. Unlike many other forms of meditation, which require withdrawal from practical life and practice severe austerities, TM does not. Did Mahesh Yogi explain to you the rationale behind that?
Yes, he said, that this is for the active people, that life can be lived in 200%, 200% inside and 200% outside.
Right.
And that this tradition of the Veda that gives this knowledge is not just for the recluse. There are those, and even in our program, we have people who like to be alone and to do their own program. We call that the Purusha Program. And they are, they live a life of meditation and knowledge and experience, and they feel knowledge. And they're not active in the outside life, but their activity is on knowledge. And so meditate and learn and study. And we have one for also the ladies, lady programs, they call it Mother Divine Program. They are the recluse. But these are small parts of the program. The program is for everyone, and the transcending is something everyone can achieve. And no matter the background, no matter the education, no matter the interest in life or the activity, everyone has to be able to achieve that and to achieve higher states of consciousness and live the full value of life. Because we are not all the same. Some people have to live. They have to procreate. They have to maintain the species. They have to maintain society. They have to rule. So there are different functions of society, and people come with different vocations and interests. They should also get a chance to enlightenment and to fulfillment. And that's why this program is for everybody.
Right. Contrary to the popular belief that life is a struggle, Maharishi started arguing against it over 60 years ago, that it's not necessary to continue in that struggle. Has that objective been realized even partially in these many decades? And it would seem not, given the kind of world that we live in right now.
Well, on the individual level, those who practice transcendental meditation regularly, they have experienced that.
True.
They have experienced that they can fulfill their lives, that there is no need to suffer in order to evolve, no need to struggle. And if there is, obstacle or difficulty, they know how to overcome it, how to go back to the self and clear it up. And through the different programs that we have done, we have actually been able to show that even the world can be different. I take an example. In Latin America, it used to be always a continent of revolutions and fights and changes and upheavals and fighting in different levels. And we have created these programs for different schools and large groups of people who are meditating together. And when they were doing that, many, many conflicts were resolved. And for a long time, it has become a most peaceful, most quiet continent. Now, we have seen the demolition of the Berlin Wall, the removal of the Cold War between the top people and the top antagonists in the world and fighters and all of that. And we have known and lived some fabulous changes and transformations in society. And we say that it is related to the large groups that have been created, be it in India, in the center of India, we have a place, we have different pockets of large groups who practice, pundits and all of that. And then, unfortunately, really, it might sound like, oh, what is that? It's crazy or whatever, but it's not. It's absolutely from ourselves a scientific thing. When the pandemic came and people were busy with other things, many of our groups dismantled because they couldn't come together for health reasons. And so we had to all of us, as we all did, face the pandemic and then take care of things in different ways. And the groups have reduced, unfortunately, and that has led to coming back of the old style of thinking about resolution of conflict and resolution of differences in terms of fighting, in terms of divisions in society, and seeing the other as something that is a threat, and therefore there comes fear from duality, there comes anger, and there comes dissatisfaction. And this is why we want to reestablish, and we want to call upon those who have means that they have a responsibility to uphold and support large groups and do an experiment in that and see that they can make a difference. And it's tangible difference. It's proven in the past. It can be proven again if you want to do a study. And so that is the reason. If the collective consciousness in this time isn't upheld by higher level of awareness through the practice of transcending, then you get all these unfortunate ways of behaving that come back.
Right. Just the last 2 or 3 points as I wind down. This is my lifelong curiosity. My background is physics, so I often come to these themes from that standpoint. Do you think consciousness is quantum, in the sense, can it be quantized? Like people are talking about quantizing gravity. Is there any connection that you see between consciousness and quantum mechanics?
Well, many people try to explain consciousness through quantum fields and quantum mechanics. Because what is consciousness? And it's a hard problem, as you know, looking into science. And where does consciousness come from? If everything is physical, well, they say, okay, not everything is localized. Then we have found fields, and the fields are delocalized, and they are, superposition and entanglement and all of these. And therefore we say, okay, now maybe consciousness is that area. Well, I like to say it in a different way. The quantum fields are consciousness, not consciousness is the quantum field. You say, what's the difference? Well, the difference is who is primary. What is primary? If you want to say that there is something physical as a primary reality of existence, and that physical something now kind of becomes quantum mechanical, and there is consciousness, and therefore consciousness appears on the quantum mechanical level, this is wrong, completely wrong. What there is, and I argue this very strongly in my book, One Unbounded Ocean of Consciousness, which gives also as a subtitle, Simple Answers to the Big Questions in Life. And I've argued this with many, many big scientists. I was with Anil Seth, with Keith Frankish recently, and many other great thinkers. I don't need to mention who they are, and I will be discussing this with more. And the reality is that consciousness is primary. So there is a field of consciousness, one idealistic, monistic field of consciousness. That is the theory that I am presenting that comes also from the Vedic tradition, that consciousness is primary, Aham Brahmasmi. And that it is this consciousness that now appears in different modes and different ways. And I explain in my book how it does that. So instead of taking, okay, let's go from the gross physical and find that the physical is actually quantum mechanical, and the quantum mechanical is actually quantum fields, and the quantum fields are most likely unified field, and then say, well, then this has consciousness or is consciousness in this way. I think we can explain the entire field of reality and physics and ethics and epistemology and the true ontology of things, the true nature of things, and explain it rationally, empirically, in a very solid way, by starting with consciousness.
I see.
So we start with a non-physical, non-material consciousness that is beyond time and space even. So even time and space don't touch it yet.
Yeah.
And then that consciousness appears as time, space, quantum fields, quantum mechanics, and then collapses or appears as different, localized values. Now, the challenge in this is, how can this be? How is it possible that the table, the body, which is very physical, that I sense and touch, are actually consciousness? And this is what I explain in the theory and the book.
I see. Would you then believe that consciousness is the essential feature of the universe, and we are all manifestations of that?
Absolutely, exactly, yes.
Okay. You are a highly regarded neuroscientist with a Ph.D. from the MIT in brain and cognitive sciences, as well as someone with profound understanding of TM and Vedic sciences. How do you come to a convergence between these two often seemingly contradictory positions?
I come to a simple convergence. They are the same. Everything is consciousness. Everything is consciousness. And whatever we see as physical and hard physical level is just a dynamics of consciousness.
Right.
Many scientists just who have looked into how we see things, what we see, how they are, and look deeply into that, they realize that it's only one perspective. Our human perspective through our eyes is one perspective. The perspective through the ears is another perspective. Perspective means a way of looking at things, which means it's not the real thing. It is just a way of looking at it. For example, you look at a red rose, and you say it is red. Wow, where is the red? What is the red?
Right.
The light shines on this, petals, and some part of the light is absorbed, actually the red, and the other goes to your eyes, and then it's a wavelength of light.
Right.
And then your brain just looks at it, and then you say, oh, I see red. It's an intimate, personal experience. I am seeing red. But where is red in nature? Where is anything in nature? If you remove the emptiness from the whole globe or whole Earth, remove the emptiness that is between the electrons and the nucleus and between the object and all that, you can put the whole Earth in a 1 centimeter cube kind of box.
Right.
So everything is emptiness. Or if you go to quantum mechanics, everything is delocalized. Everything is, fields. Everything is floating. There is superposition of possibilities. So what are these? Are they real? Yeah, they are real on their level. Yeah. It's a different perspective. One perspective is red. One other perspective is 700 nanometers wavelength.
Right.
So that's the different perspective. Another perspective is by the Large Hadron Collider. It's just particles, in fields that just sparkle and, float.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is they are all consciousness.
Okay.
And consciousness looking at itself from an infinite number of perspectives. And when you're looking at me and I'm looking at you, we are real. We are talking real. We are not saying it's just an illusion.
Right.
But we're saying that reality is on its own level. It is one level of consciousness looking at another level of consciousness. One perspective looking at another aspect of itself.
Right.
And that's all there is.
Right. You mentioned the idea of emptiness. There is a concept, what is known as kshanika. Kshanika means moments. It's been long discussed in India for at least 2,000 years that if everything is moment to moment to moment, what lies between those two moments? And that's the kind of emptiness that we are talking about.
Exactly. What lies is a concept of nothingness.
Right. Yeah.
Because nothingness is a concept. And so what I call this, for modern terms, a bit of consciousness,
Right.
a moment of awareness. And the moment of awareness is when the subject and the object come together through a process that links the subject to the object. And our life is, in that sense, quantized, because
There you go. Yeah.
we go from moment to moment to moment to moment. So we have an experience, and then it changes us. Another experience, it changes us a little. Some change can be very big. You lose a parent, you lose a friend. It's a big change. You just look at a flower, it's a small change, but it's a change. And that's how we build ourselves and construct ourselves through these moments of experience, which I describe as bits of consciousness,
I see.
bits
Yeah, right.
borrowed.
It is quantized in a sense, yeah, as you mentioned.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
To conclude, Dr. Nader, among all the Vedic wisdom that you have had access to, which one do you find the most compelling and easy to share it with the rest of the world?
Yoga is great
Okay.
because it unifies, and Vedanta is ultimate,
Right.
But for Vedanta, it requires some preparation to understand on the steps.
Right.
But all the Vedic aspects are great. Ayurveda, it depends what you like on the level of physical well-being and balance. Ayurveda on the level of mental and physical at the same time. Yoga on the level of understanding the Upanishads and all the, all the values. The Ramayana is a huge teaching. The Bhagavad Gita, the Mahabharata is more difficult to understand in its depths, but the Bhagavad Gita is supreme. The Ramayana is really a story of our life, of our physiology. Right. I've written, a book on that, how the Ramayana is actually the story also of the dynamics of the laws of nature as they express themselves in our body, in our physical body. Right. And how our body is actually a representation of Veda. We are an image of Veda in a physical form. And Veda is like the blueprint of our body. And that's how, we can explain that some sages and knowers, they say humans were created in the image of God, or Aham Brahmasmi, I am totality, etc.
No, that's such an epic conceit that India has given Aham Brahmasmi. I think a lot of Westerners get unsettled by that. They also get unsettled by the situational logic that you read in the Gita. It's not overarching, it's not absolute, but logic changes from situation to situation. So in the Western tradition of sins and redemption and all that, that does not exist as part of the Indian thought at all. I'm glad that you zeroed in on those things. Are you sure you were born in Lebanon, or you were born in India?
Maybe I'm reborn there.